Hello everybody and welcome back to my survival shenanigans. Now today I wanted to originally start off by making a much nicer and far more detailed pond as well as a new willow next to the Weeping Willow Inn. However, when I went to my storage to pick up some blocks to build it with, I realized that I really don't have many building blocks. I have loads of stuff like iron and gold and diamonds and redstone and all the more rare stuff. But when it comes to stuff like andesite, which is a block that I wanted to use to do some highlights in the lake, I opened the chest and I have 7. And that is a problem because I didn't just want to use the andesite for the lake. I use andesite for some soft details when I'm doing stone structures as well. So I felt it was about time that we either make a mine or a quarry. And I decided to go with a quarry because I feel like the kingdom needs a place where all the stone for the castle and all the different buildings came from. So I flew around for a little bit looking for a suitable place for a quarry that we could demolish, but ultimately ended back at the castle right next to the iron farm actually, because I thought this area was a fantastic spot for a quarry because we could essentially just extend the dip in between the different hills and quarry down until I felt that the quarry was deep enough, and then maybe create a mining entrance down there which would lead me down to diamond level where I can start mining for real. This really was the perfect spot for a quarry in my eyes because even the entrance would be very easy to plan out and do because I mean the path that leads to the iron farm is right there, so we connect the entrance to that and bam, it's done. Things did not go according to plan though, because I for one didn't know that andesite and even diorite and granite don't spawn above Y level 79. Now this isn't usually a problem because the ground level usually sits at around 64, but we're in mountain biome, so the quarry started at level 90, meaning that I had to dig down 10 blocks before I could start finding the blocks I actually wanted from this project. And as you can see, as we went down, the quarry started to get very narrow very fast, to a point where it just looked silly, and that's with me stepping down 2 blocks every time. So I very quickly realized that this was not gonna work out, though I still liked the way it looked when it was done, even though it was very narrow at the bottom. But then an idea started brewing. What if, right, what if this was a quarry and they chopped off as much of the mountain as they were comfortable with without exposing themselves to like a possible landslide that would kill them as the mountain fell on top of their head, and this provided enough stone to construct the castle and some of the buildings. But then as they started to dig down, they at first ran into a bit of granite and it was just like, oh no, there's a bit of granite, we're gonna dig around that, only to realize as they excavated more and more of the remaining stone that it's just nothing but granite and it's too thick for them to be worth punching through it. So they were just like, alright boys, that's it, this is just really not worth bothering with, and they just picked up their stuff and started quarrying somewhere else. And the reason this works is because we're not using granite anywhere, because I generally don't use granite, because if I want this kind of color or texture, I usually go for clay bricks instead. So it makes sense for it to be granite, right, since it's not used anywhere. So they probably excavated it, looked at it and were like, wow, that no, let's just go somewhere else. Now at first I thought I would just fill in the granite and that would be it, but then more and more ideas started flooding in. Like for example, at the back of the quarry there's a lot of dirt, so what if that section of the quarry had a landslide in it and it filled in most of it? Then I noticed more dirt and grass on top of this hill, so I was like, well, what if there was a landslide here as well, but it was a lot more recent, so it's gonna be more dirt, less grass, and it's also steeper, so the dirt should probably fall farther and spread out more. Then I felt it was a bit weird how the granite was really defined with loads of slabs and stairs, and the stone was just stepping down 2 blocks every time, so I spent like 30 minutes placing down stone slabs and stairs to bring it closer to what the granite is like, though I didn't want to bring it too close because I felt like they were much more meticulous when digging out the stone around the granite than the stone they were quarrying out of the mountain, because these were the remaining bits of stone they would get out of this, so they wanted to meticulously pick every little bit because there was nothing left pretty much. After that I was like, well, if the landslide at the back of the quarry, the one I did first, happened a long time ago, there should probably be some greenery there, right? Stuff would start growing. So I went back and I got some oak leaves and I spread those around as well, and I finished it off by flooding the 2 bottom layers of the quarry, because if you've ever been to a quarry, there's a good chance it had water in it because it's a, you know, a natural dish for the water to collect in, and since it's a quarry there's a good chance it has solid stone at the bottom, so the water will stay there. And I must say I love the way this turned out. This is an amazing terrain feature to have here. It's just so unique, it adds some much needed color to the grey mountains. I love it, it's awesome. However, even though the abandoned quarry turned out great, I still don't have any andesite. I found like 30 blocks when digging it out. So it was time for plan B, a mine shaft. Now, after flying around for a little bit, trying to find a suitable spot for our mineshaft entrance, I settled on this spot right here on the other side of the mountain. I didn't do anything too spectacular though, because, well, I just really needed the resources so I can start working on the lake, but also because the cave update will come out later this year and we will have to make a mine in some unexplored terrain so we can get copper and stuff. This is also like a prime spot for a cool feature that we can build later on, so I didn't want to disturb the area too much. Now, after digging around for a little bit and finally getting some more andesite as well as gravel so I can make coarse dirt, I finally started work on the Weeping Willow Pond. Now, after the last video, I went on YouTube and watched a ton of different terraforming videos that were more focused around water features and how to decorate them, how to put them together, and how to tie them to the surrounding area. And the one I liked the most was simply called Minecraft: How to Build a Pond by a chap called One Team, and I will link it in the description because it's very, very good. It's essentially like a step-by-step guide on how to make a good-looking pond. So I started off by doing a bunch of terraforming and flattening out the land a lot because I feel the biggest issue with the previous pond was that it was simply too small. The scale of it just fell way off with this giant tavern on the side as well as the castle in the background. I also decided that the willow isn't gonna sit on an island. There actually isn't gonna be an island at all in the pond, and it's gonna follow the terrain a lot more, so it's not gonna be just like a circular body of water. I also covered over a lot of the stone that was in this area, and I feel like I will end up covering even more of it in the future. Now, one concern that I did have was that the pond was gonna be too narrow and it was gonna look more like a river, so I constantly kept shaving more and more of the sides, and I think I ended up with a decently sized pond that looks pretty good. At least, you know, size and shape wise at this point. Anyway, I wanted to make sure that I didn't shave off too much dirt at the front though, sort of the area that's going down into the valley where the tavern is, because that would look kind of weird if we were to have a lake, then one block of dirt, and then a hill going down. That would just not look right. Then it was time to start lining the pond with cobblestone, andesite, and stone, which is something I didn't want to do with the previous pond because I didn't think it would look good, but after watching the video tutorial, it actually does look good if you know how to do it. But that's not the only reason why it's good, because it also allows you to then use slabs and stairs to soften the sides a little bit, so you don't have these harsh one-block drops all over the place. You can soften them by adding these smaller blocks. And then at the very bottom, just as the guide commands, I added some sand and coarse dirt, which added some really nice contrast. And this was, I think, the point where it all clicked for me and I was like, wait, this is just like building a building. Essentially, you're doing the same stuff. It's the same idea, right? You have the main block, which in this case is stone, but you don't want to use just stone, right? So you add some light detail, in this case cobblestone and andesite. Then you don't want it to be flat, so you make it so that it's deeper in certain areas, and you also add some slabs and stairs to add some additional depth. You then sprinkle in some pretty high contrast blocks like the coarse dirt and sand, and then you finish it off by adding some greenery, which is, you know, your detailing. And that honestly kind of blew my mind, because that is a very similar set of steps that I used to design the tavern that's sitting right next to it. Then after I filled the lake with water, I simply ran through with bone meal to get some seagrass. I sprinkled in a few sea pickles here and there for some light illumination. I placed down some lily pads, put down a piece of kelp here and there, and then it was time to remake the willow. Now, I was pretty happy with how the previous willow turned out, so I was essentially just gonna make that just bigger, because the scale of the willow was way off, especially when compared to the tavern it was sitting next to and the mountain that was behind it, but also because on that scale you can't really do that much detail, so it's kind of hard to make it look nice without it getting too wide. And I'm very happy with how the willow turned out. Now after that, I got some oak leaves and I sprinkled them on the outside of the pond to add some additional detail, and then I decided to make a path that wraps around the front of the lake. It doesn't go all the way, but it goes about, you know, a little bit over halfway. Now, this would have absolutely been better if left alone, and it was just sort of this picturesque lake with a willow in the distance, but there are people living nearby, and if there is one thing you can count on when it comes to people, it's that they will ruin everything. Then, after the lake was done, I felt it was finally time to design the tower that's gonna sit at the peak of the mountain that we connected to with a bridge previously. Now, originally this was meant to be either a clock tower or a wizard tower, and I think it's the main reason why it took me so long to finally do it, because I tried making clock towers on top of here, and all of them were too bulky with the bell and the redstone and all that, and I also tried making a bunch of wizard towers and make them kind of like whimsy and a bit weird, but they felt really out of place. So in the end, end, after failing like 8 or 9 times to create a wizard or a clock tower, I just designed a tower. And I think this is my best tower yet because I went all out with the detail and I think it turned out great. I tried really hard to make this one look good because unlike the castle, which has a lot of stuff going on and your eyes are constantly drawn to different areas, this one is just sitting there on its own at the peak of the mountain and is very visible. You can see it from pretty much anywhere. But I think the main reason why it turned out so good, if I may say so myself, is that I just have more experience building these kinds of towers because I struggled my way through building an entire castle that's currently sitting behind the camera. So I just have more experience. I basically just took different elements from the different towers I already built, I smooshed them together, and then I added some extra stuff on top. I also finally designed a banner for the kingdom, which I then hung on top of the tower. Now, the main reason why I didn't use banners earlier is because they are considered entities, so once you get far enough away, they unfortunately disappear. So if you're looking at the tower from farther away, you unfortunately can't see the banners. Also, in the end, I shaved off quite a bit of the mountain peak and added some greenery on top of it as well. And this is because originally I wanted to keep the peak intact because the tower was sitting a little bit farther away from the bridge and there was a short pathway leading up to it. But when I tried that in creative mode, it just looked a bit weird. So I attached it to the bridge and shaved off the rest of the peak to make it look more natural. Now, while the tower turned out great, it kind of highlighted how flat a lot of the castle walls are. So the next step in our grand plan was to go over the castle and add some detail to it because it was starting to look really flat, especially compared to the new tower. So I started off with the 2 really tall towers because those 2 really stick out. You can see them from pretty much anywhere. So I basically just went around and modified the shape a little bit, slimmed them here and there, bulked them up here and there, and just used a bunch of stairs, walls, and grindstones to make them less flat and also make them a little bit nicer to look at. But I still think they need a little bit more work, especially at the top. Then it was time for the rickety towers because I was really starting to dislike the way they look at the top. It just looked too bulky, it was flat and pretty dull because it was just stone and underside, which basically looks like stone from a distance. So I slimmed the tops down a little bit. I didn't want to do it too much because I like the overall shape. I just didn't like how bulky they were. They looked way too fat. So I added some grindstones, removed a block here and there, and replaced them with stairs. So they're now looking a little bit nicer, I think. Next on the menu was the bottom of the 2 really tall towers because there was literally just a flat wall of stone. So I broke that up with some stairs and I added some walls and once again grindstones to the side because, you know, grindstones are just amazing. Now, I originally thought I would just add windows in there, which would kind of make sense, but it really didn't look right for some reason. So I just went with the stairs to break up the flatness. And then I finally moved on to the bane of my existence, the building I've been trying to decorate since like day 1. The problem I had with decorating this building is that this side was too big for the small and intricate detail and it just looked weird because it was like oddly busy but you couldn't really make anything out, but at the same time too small for something more grand like a mosaic style window. But after a little bit of fiddle farting, well actually a lot of fiddle farting, I came up with something that I think looks really nice, and it's once again just a combination of stairs, walls and grindstones, and I also made 2 windows at the top and created a small fake room behind them. And to top it all off, I decided to sort of finish off the mountain peak because I have no plans for adding anything here pretty much. So I started off by building a spruce tree at the edge here, which looks really nice as you're like walking into the castle, and then I added another one over here as well. Now originally this area was supposed to be a lot more busy. I thought I would expand the castle all over the peak and then do like a courtyard where the pathway is now, but at this point I think I'm just gonna leave it as it is because the area has a really nice feel to it. It feels really good. I get this really good feeling whenever I'm walking into the castle. It is just really nice. I think this is going to be one of those areas where less is more. The one thing I have to do is place some string on top of the path because it is constantly covered in snow and you can't see it. And the final thing I did here was to sprinkle out a bunch of oak leaves to create bushes because I feel like people wouldn't really be walking up in here, so there would be a ton of bushes all over the place, and I also added some berry bushes too. And that is what is officially now the backside of the castle, even though I considered it to be the front to begin with, done, and I think it turned out great. So as always guys, I thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. We got a lot of stuff done today. We made the quarry, we made a mining entrance, we made the Weeping Willow Lake, we made the tower, and we finished the mountain peak all in one. So yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.